I want to start this with the image here of the head of the Reserve Bank of India, because he's talking about what he's going to do in his country with the current global economic turmoil. He said he's going to either reduce rates or keep them the same. Why? He's afraid of a global recession. Now, this is not a Great Depression. This is not a massive collapse of the economy. This is just simply saying if growth rates stall or diminish for major economies, his economy is going to be impacted as well. His is one of the major economies in the world. And if enough other countries start sneezing, they may catch cold. That's the saying that goes. And especially if the United States is sneezing, a lot of other countries in the world can really catch cold, economically speaking. So he's saying we're going to either cut interest rates or hold them steady. That's his signal to investors and to business leaders that they are aware of economic conditions and they've got a plan. They want to mitigate a potential economic downturn with lower interest rates. So what does that mean? A lower interest rate means it's easier to borrow money for short-term purchases, for further investment, and it's also easier to park your debt there, pay a lower interest rate on it to service that debt. So during your downturn time, if you happen to be, let's say, burning through cash to pay off your debt, you burn through less cash where the interest rates are lower. And once the recession has ended, you can go back into business and be fine with that. At any rate, it's not just the Bank of India. Also, the Bank of New Zealand and other central banks are considering cutting interest rates and making announcements like this to calm investors. Because investors like things to be calm. Consider this situation. Let's tell you that I've got an idea for an investment. If you give me $50 today, then 2 months from now, I'll give you $100. Now, if that's all I tell you, most of you may be thinking this sounds too good to be true. You should be thinking that at least. If you are ready to hand me $50, well, thank you. Please do. But I won't give you 100. I'll just take the 50. At any rate. But let's say you want to know more about my plans. Well, let's say I present to you a business plan, and I say, here's what I'm going to take with your investment, how I'm going to make things or provide services at such a profit, at such a rate, and here are my customers. And because of all the research I've done, I believe I've got a solid business model, and I'm reaching out to you and other people like you to collect these $50 shares, and then when the time is due, I pay you for your interest. I give you $100, and we're done with it. I carry on making money. You enjoy the extra 50 you have. Life goes on. If you think I could double your money in 2 months and present a sound business plan, you may be willing to invest in that opportunity. And there we go. I've given you something solid. I've given you I've given you assurances that we're not going to take wild risks. And again, that's what they're trying to say. We're lowering interest rates, stay calm. Things may take a downturn, but around here and in India, they're going to be under control. We've got a handle on things. That's what he's trying to say. Now, if in this example I said, give me the 50 and in 2 months I'll give you 100, and then you ask me, well, before I give you the 50, how are you going to make money? If I told you, well, I know these guys that play poker, and they're pretty bad at it most of the time. Anyway, I'm going to bet in their poker gains, and I'm sure by the end of 2 months, I'll have doubled my money, and I'll give you, I'll have more than doubled my money, and I'll give you, an extra $50 for your time, and I'll just keep whatever's left. You may be thinking I could potentially lose all that and not be able to pay you back, because there's a lot of risk involved there, and there's not a very good exit plan. I don't have a reason to believe that I'm really going to win. I said they're bad most of the time, but there's an element of luck in the game, and maybe they're not as bad as I think they are, or maybe somebody else joins who's a genius at poker and cleans us out. This is not a good investment. You would rather I have a business plan than, hey, I'm going to go bet it on some horses, and these are I know which horse is going to win. I know. I just know. This is not solid. So that risk of that volatility, that uncertainty, you don't have much trust in that as an investor, and you won't put your money there. And that leads me to the next chart that I want to show you here. This is this is from some economists who took a look at the tariff regime recommended by the Trump administration in his Liberation Day speech, as he called it. And before those tariffs were paused, if all of them went into effect on the days they said it was going to go into effect, they calculated this is what happens to the U.S. economy. And yes, red is bad. This is not a Christmas picture. This is red is bad, green is good kind of thing. And the darker the shade, the more it is bad or good. But that's what would have happened to the U.S. And Australia, they brought out just to show, and I'll talk about that, and what happens to China. As you can see, if the USA suddenly stops trade with China and the rest of the world, well, China does take it on the jaw. They get hit hard, but the USA gets hit even harder and takes a lot more damage to its economy. This is not a good thing to see after you've announced the tariffs, thinking the tariffs are going to be fine. It indicates a lack of testing. It indicates a lack of a Kriegspiel, such as what the German General Staff would do in their military exercises before attacking somebody or waging a war. They would game it out and determine, based on the outcome of the game, what things they need to pay attention to, or what things will work and what things won't work, and then try it again until they get consistently good results with their testing. And then they know what they're going. Well, they didn't Kriegspiel this. They didn't wargame it. They announced them. And let's be real here. I'm not going to take a knock in a partisan manner, but I am going to take a knock in an economic matter, that the announcement of the tariffs and the formula to use them was not based on any actual economic theory. And there are plenty of economic theories out there that are just bad anyway. They could have pulled from some of those, but no, this was not even one of those. This was just, I mean, sometimes you can provide the right answer, sometimes you can provide the wrong answer, sometimes you provide an answer that's not even wrong. It's like, what? The math behind this was not even wrong. It was just not even wrong. That's how far off it was. It had not been tested. It had not been thought out. It had not been analyzed. Now, yes, the Trump administration has made a point of wanting to put their own stamp on things, to be populist in their movement, to draw leaders from the people and put them in charge, saying that they could do as good or even better than a team of so-called experts. And there was a pushback against intellectual authority, intellectual, power, might, whatever you want to call it, but there's a push against it. And this reflects that no one really looked at it. Now, I am not trying to be a partisan. I'm not trying to say you need to vote this way or vote that way, or these guys are right and these guys are wrong. I'm simply saying this was not a well thought out policy. This one here, not well thought out. And it's probably an extension of the political decision-making processes that are predominant in the current Trump administration. It just seems to be that way. And the analysis done by the economists at Victoria University that got this, well, they showed, like, okay, if the USA cuts off trade with the rest of the world, this is the damage to the U.S. economy. In 2025 alone, drop of consumption by 2%, drop of GDP by 2.6%, drop of real investment by 6.6%, drop of employment by 2.7%. So that would mean if unemployment right now is at 4.2%, that would take it to around 5.96%, somewhere in that area. And you may think, well, 6%, it doesn't sound too bad, but it's going to be really bad for the people who are in that 4.2 to 6% who lose their job as a result of this. And that's millions of people and their families. That's a huge impact. And it's a sudden one. We couldn't plan for that. These are people, they voted for the administration, they didn't vote for the administration. It doesn't matter. They are the common or garden average American losing their jobs. 2.7% of the people with jobs are losing them because of the tariffs. Now this again assumes full impact of the tariffs, no pause, no permanent pause, everything going through unfiltered. And some of the worst numbers are on investment. Because the idea was, I do remember this, that, okay, if you place the tariffs, it will encourage companies to build in America to service the American market, which is a very profitable market. There's no question. This is a nation that has a lot of money in it, and it's a good market. But the factories that would be necessary to service this market aren't here today. If we apply the tariffs on Monday, the factories do not appear on Tuesday. The factories may appear 2 or 3 years after Tuesday. And that's if there are good investment opportunities in the United States. The fact that the stock markets have swung wildly is already one indication that no, this is not a good time to be investing. The second part is the very chaos in the tariffs, going full bore, here's how they are on day one, and then a few days later pulling back, a few days later modifying this, a few more days modifying that. It keeps changing. And we say there's a 90-day pause, and that will negotiate with all these other countries, but the expectation is you can't get 90 countries to sign a deal in 90 days, even if all your operators are standing by waiting to take orders on the phone. That just is not going to be realistic. You're going to be faced with the end of that 90-day period, and most nations not having negotiated a trade deal. Do you extend that pause, or do you just cancel them outright? And if you extend the pause, at what point does the pause kick in? What happens if nations refuse? And there are very large nations that are refusing to make a negotiation. They're simply insisting, get rid of those tariffs right now. That's our position. They're saying this is our position. Get rid of them. They shouldn't have been there. They don't belong there. They make no sense. Get rid of them. And if that is going on, even if the Trump administration says, okay, fine, cancel everything, it didn't happen, they're gone. Well, that's still an erosion of trust, because even if those pauses become permanent, the effects of that pause become permanent, the economists figured, well, you know what? There's still a huge shock to investment in the United States, and there'll still be a hit on employment. There will still be a hit on real GDP and real consumption. China will still take a hit too, but not as bad a hit as the U.S. And the reason why investment is down here and way up in Australia is because Australia is steady as she goes, following precedent, following the rules that everybody else is playing by, and by doing so, offers a stable environment. So if you want to build a factory in 2025 and you're worried about the volatility in the United States market and how interest rates are rising, remember, check the bond markets and watch the interest rates continue to rise as investors, including other nations, are dumping dollars, getting rid of them. Then it will become more expensive to finance those factories in the United States, because nobody ever buys a factory out of their own pocket money. They take a loan from the bank and have it insured, and then if it's a bust, they're not out anything. The corporation shuts down and the insurers cover things, and it's all handled, and it's not really a hit to the personal bottom line of the person who took out the loan to make that investment in the business. It's how it works. In fact, if you try to live debt free, if you buy things, chances are you're paying somebody else's debt. You're not living debt free. Just, a thing. Not necessarily a bad or good thing. It's just a thing. Anyway, but back to this situation in the United States, the incredible chaos that accompanied the tariff announcements and the fallout, the changes in tariffs, the change in the stock market, and couple this with the fact that there have been arguments between Donald Trump and the Supreme Court, and he has refused to follow rulings from the Supreme Court. This is a clear violation of a constitutional principle. Now, whether you believe he should or should not follow along with what the courts say, the fact remains it is a violation of the constitutional principle, and other nations and their investors are looking at that. And they're saying if you've got a ruler that is ruling by decree, is not consulting the legislature, is not being bound by the courts, basically making their own rules, you've got essentially an emerging market. It's like investing in an unstable nation in a you name the part of the world that has unstable nations, and that's why people don't invest there. Now, there are stable nations right next to them that people will invest in because they're stable. But where you have capricious rulers that do not respect the rule of law, and they're clearly in conflict with basic governing principles, or they abolish those and just rule on their own, those are not good havens for investment. They present a high degree of risk, because how do you know that even if that ruler says, let's cancel all the tariffs, let's get rid of everything, bad idea, I fired the people responsible, well, great for now, but how do we know that that person isn't going to come up with a similar decision on this or some other topic in the future? We don't know that. We don't have assurances that they're going to continue following the rules because they broke them, and they're not facing a penalty. They haven't stepped back. If a new leader came in and promised to follow principles, that could help replace things. But we don't have that happening in the United States right now. That's not how it works around here. We don't have a parliamentary system of government. And so this president is in office until, well, definitely until the end of this term. Unless there's a violation of the constitutional principles that limit the president to only 2 terms. And then that makes it even worse for investment. You see, it's not good. And these are the numbers that are driving choices made by investors. So when we look at the interest rates and how they are increasing in the United States, decreasing in other parts of the world, how the dollar is losing its authority, slowly, but still losing its authority, and how this tariff regime is essentially the United States breaking up with the rest of the world in a very untested, chaotic way, we have a terrible investment climate in the United States relative to the rest of the world. Okay, terrible. That is a normative comment, and I shouldn't have said that. I should use a positive comment. Relative to the rest of the world, the United States is not as desirable as an investment environment as what places like, for example, Australia would offer. Now, desirable is a positive term. Desirable, undesirable. It just indicates sane people with big money are not going to put it in a place where it looks like a roulette wheel is guiding the economy. They want stability. They want predictability. They want to know what the rules are, and if the rules are going to change, they want advance warning of that. This is why whenever the Federal Reserve in the United States is going to make a rate change, they like to telegraph that in advance. They like it to be known, maybe not how much they're going to change it or what, but they like it to be known that they're thinking about things in a certain way, So that way investors can prepare for it. And they're not getting a surprise when the Federal Reserve changes things. I remember, oh gosh, 30 years ago, there was a peso crisis. And the government of Mexico did not tell anybody about it. And one morning, people woke up and they found out that what they had in terms of cash and bank holdings had been diminished to 10% or less of what it was the day before. The peso devalued dramatically overnight. And people were furious about that. And when it emerged that the leadership in Mexico had actually communicated in advance to their well-connected friends that that was going to happen, and they all cashed out on the peso and bought dollar assets and didn't lose their value when the peso crashed, and then they can convert the dollars back into pesos and get way more pesos than they ever had before. People were livid about that. They were furious, not just mad, but furious, because not only had there been abuse of power against them, but also at the same time abuse of power to help well-connected elites that were basically buddying up with the government. And the fact that we also saw with the market chaos, we saw people accuse those who were connected to Donald Trump of profiting from this. Whether or not that happened, the accusations themselves are indicative of a popular anger arising out of this situation. And it's not just a popular anger from one partisan side. This popular anger is extending through a good part of the Republican base. So it is bipartisan anger against this over that concern. And if these numbers take effect, and mind, these are just recession numbers. These are not including things like a sharper dip in the dollar or a sharper rise in U.S. interest rates or some other crisis that forces the United States to have a large amount of deficit spending in order to cover, like it did in 2008, and then a concomitant knock-on effect on the U.S. Budget itself and what it has to pay in servicing debt, which I should do in another episode of this here. No, this is just looking at the impact of the tariffs and not gaming in anything else. And this is bad. This is very bad here. What should be done? Well, I can't say because I'm not in a position to say that. But what could be done? Well, number one, if suddenly all the tariffs are gone, then things might begin to settle down again in the United States. It will still take a while for people to believe that it's safe to invest again, to invest again in the United States. But continued respect for the rule of law, some reining in of the randomness, perhaps something that says if we are going to reduce the government, rather than have it be done by the Department of Government Efficiency, it will be done by other more established means. Things of that nature help to reassure people that we're playing by the rules that you expect us to play by. And that helps things going forward. Absent that, the chaos remains, the turmoil remains, bearing in mind that this is less than 3 months since the inauguration of Donald Trump in this term of office. And all this has already happened. That in less than 3 months, we have a chart that says best case scenario minus 4.8% on U.S. investment this year, 2.1% hike in unemployment, 2% drop in real GDP. That's the best case if those paused tariffs become permanent. Now, if they're undone completely, these numbers can get somewhat better, except I don't think the investment one would. But Australia and other countries like Australia, this is just not the only one that benefits, but other countries will be benefiting because they're having more stable policies. Places like Italy, Germany, France, they're more stable in their approach. They're going to attract the investment dollars that would have gone to the United States because of their more stable economic climate. As for China, they may know something, or they may have a plan that gets them out of this. If they can move their numbers by 1%, then they can turn a lot of these negatives into small positives. If the United States moves things by 1%, doesn't help us. I mean, anything's better than what we have here, but it's still a sharp drop in the economy in 2025, and then less of a drop in succeeding years. USA has got to move the numbers by a lot more than 1% to get rid of this, and it's got to be done through better stability, better demonstration that it's playing by the rules that other people expect us to play by. Otherwise, the same reason that you won't give me $50 to go bet on my poker game, people won't put money into the United States. It will be too risky. I hope this helps you out. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll keep making these sort of things as long as people be watching them. So, hope you enjoy this. Or, well, I don't know about enjoy. I hope you learned something from this. I hope it gives you something more to work with, something more to look at as you take in all the economic news. That don't go for all the hyperbole and people swinging up and swinging down. Look for deeper analysis from actual economists, people who have some expertise in looking at these things and going, one thing that no one's looking at is this. And you look at this, here's the picture that unfolds. That's what you want. There really are experts out there who know what they're talking about, and they're not just making stuff up and trying to throw it down your throat and make you believe it because they get some kind of power that way. I don't get any power. I just get likes and comments and subscribes and stuff. And yeah, a little bit of money from YouTube advertising. That's it, and that's going to pay for the books I'm reading to keep this going. So yeah, I'm an expert. I get nothing. I really get nothing out of this. You can trust me, man. Or at least use what I'm saying as a jumping off point for your own research. And just stay sane, stay sober. If somebody's talking about some crazy-eyed stuff and like, who's really behind this, get away. The people who are really behind this are in government, and they're elected officials and people who got appointed by the elected officials. And I'm telling you, they didn't really have if they had had a plan, this wouldn't be it. This is just a result of some numbers that came out of I don't know where. I really don't know where. And it happened. So yeah. I'm grading their homework, and it's an F. This is if you do tariffs the way that happened and you tank the economy the way it's tanking, you get an F. Now, again, tanking economy, that is a normative comment, but the economy is projected to have a recession. And how deep, we don't know yet, but it is going to reduce in growth. Unemployment will increase. These are positive statements. This is what's going to happen. Anyway, I've gone on. It's almost half an hour. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do some research, do some reading, and we'll see you again. Cheerio and bye-bye.